Coming up on this episode, we're talking about HR in a fully remote organization. What does it look like? How does AI factor into all of this? And how do you help people make their best efforts to advance the organization? All this and more coming up. I'm Dr. Bill Sodeman, and this is The Perfect Route. Welcome to the show, viewers and listeners. I hope you're ready for a sparkling conversation with our guest today, Kellé Thorpe. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Could you tell us a little bit about you and your company?
Sure. I am Kellé Thorpe, founder of Commas with Kellé. So my work sits at the intersection of finance and leadership. So after overseeing upwards of $2 billion in revenue in the corporate, mostly top AmLaw 100 space, I realized that business owners could use the support that we have in the large corporate finance and leadership space. So I started solving their organizational problems, we'll call them, by giving them financial clarity and visibility in their intersections of personal wealth and the business wealth. So I really realized that leaders are developed, but not always equipped to connect their decisions to business outcomes. So what I do is help them translate financial data into leadership decisions. So growth isn't just happening and it's actually understood and sustainable.
That's brilliant. What drew you into the world of learning and development from this financial lens?
Yeah, so I actually, as you just alluded to, I didn't start in learning and development. I feel like learning and development is innate, of course, in all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So starting in the finance and ops space, and it was really when I was at about $30 million, so a bit smaller law firm. What I realized early on is most of the challenges of the organizations face aren't just financial, they're decision-making challenges. And decision-making challenges is directly tied to leadership, learning, and development. So my perspective evolved into what most looked at managing the numbers to asking the different questions. So questions like, are your leaders equipped to make strong decisions with the information that we give them? Because most of the organizations didn't have learning problems. They had financial visibility problems and didn't know the right questions to ask to be equipped. So when leaders can't clearly see how their decisions impact the business, learning doesn't fully translate into their performance. And that's ultimately what they want to do, is perform well.
Yes. There's two sides to the coin there. And I've seen this in my own coaching practice, that I often talk with executives who very much know the operational details of what they're supervising, but leadership may not come naturally to them.
Yep. Yeah. I was just gonna, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I feel like that's exactly what the learning and development space helps them to do, is develop that. Everyone's not innate leader, and that's okay. I feel like sometimes that gets frowned upon, and that's not always a bad thing. We need both. We need those who lead well and those who follow well, right? So, but those that are in leadership positions have to have the space in an LED to learn how to be great equipped leaders in order for the business to function well.
It takes time for leaders, especially new leaders, to blossom and to thrive in their roles. And I've even seen this in leaders who move up the ladder, because the higher you go, the more strategic issues crop up. The nature of the conversation changes, and it's so important to develop these skills and capabilities early in the executive career.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because a part of my story is I was actually am a teen mom. So I worked my way through college as I worked my way up the corporate ladder. So I was very blessed to move much further ahead in my career faster than actually my degree because I was working really hard. But
Hmm.
in that, it did take a lot of like Myers-Briggs testing and a lot of trainings and things like that because by the time I don't even think I was 30 yet, I was already in an accounting manager and then a director of finance role. So it took a lot of things that at that young age, of course, I was leading people that were far older than me, that were wiser than me from a leadership standpoint, may have been. I had to do a lot of reading and a lot of training to understand how to lead them well and what I wanted to do well. And my role there was lead them well. So, and because of that, I still am. I just love to learn. Learning is my way of procrastination, actually. So it's not always good. It's not always good because I'll pick up a self help or some type of development book when I know I have a boatload of other things that I really need to be doing. But
Hmm.
it's my procrastination way of still doing something, but not the things I'm supposed to be doing. But yeah, I am a lifelong learner. And I did realize early on when my career was developing very fast, I mean, some could say, which is true, faster than my maturity in some aspects of age, that it really took a lot of L&D to get me to the space of leading well.
I can relate to your comment about learning as procrastination. And I always justify it from the lens of lifelong learning.
Yeah.
There, there needs to be time set aside in the week, and I actually block it out in my schedule to, learn whether it's about AI or doing a better podcast or helping my coaching business thrive and get to a higher level. Um, so, speaking of the lifelong learning piece, what does the learning function look like to you? Who should it serve? How should it be structured? And where should it sit in the broader organization?
Yeah, I think well, as we know, AI has changed a lot of things nowadays. I mean, a lot. So, in our world, it doesn't sit at traditional learning, in my opinion, anymore. It really shows up as financial intelligence embedded directly into the leadership, and you mentioned earlier, and strategy. So, oftentimes, we have these powerful tools now in AI that we can leverage in the some aspects of strategy space that really help us to learn and learn faster than I was just listening to as I was stuck at the airport last night, a podcast about the fact that people are now able to get bachelor's degrees in 3 to 6 months. And I was like,
Really?
man, yes. I'm gonna have to after this. I'm gonna find the episode and email it to you. It was so fascinating, and the debate was: Are they really learning what we learned in some maybe 3 years if you were brilliant, maybe 4 to 6 for others. It took a little longer, but are you
Hmm.
really able to learn that much information in 3 to 6 months? And I just found that so fascinating. And I really feel like what it boils down to is I've always been the one to say that I feel trades, as we know, are very important in our country. So not everyone is cut out to go to college and get a 4-year degree. But at the same time, because of my non-traditional way of obtaining my degree, I really realized I was ahead of people I was hiring that had already obtained their degrees in many spaces because of working while getting a degree. So I really feel like the learning function shows up in a place of that's where I mean it's embedded in your strategy. But in my organization specifically, when we're working with CEOs, because normally that's who we're working with is the business owner or the CEO of the business and other direct reports of the leadership team, to not just review the numbers, but actually interpret them in ways so their decision making is clearer and very intentional. Because if your leaders can't connect their decisions to the financial outcomes, then learning isn't going to translate into the impact that you want them to have. So, at a certain level, more data isn't the problem. It's teaching them how to interpret the data, which is part of the learning and development.
I agree. I agree. And, um, circling back to your earlier comment about quickly attaining a bachelor degree, it makes me concerned that an important part of that education process is not fully developed, and that is building the habit of lifelong learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Do I wonder too? I think, I mean, we've been saying that kids, especially, I would say the last probably decade, have grown up, probably longer than that actually, in the microwave society. That's something
Mhm.
we've talked about a lot. And I actually haven't heard that term in quite a while. But if it's, I mean, it's faster than a microwave now. Like, I don't know, it's an induction
Mhm.
oven because it's like
Yeah.
insanely quick. And I do agree, like, we're working on the, I would probably say, the crust of, there definitely is gaps in what's missing. And it's going to be probably 5 years in that we'll realize holistically how much that has really held us back in some parts by accelerating certain pieces way too fast.
And in my one of my previous roles, I handled certification L&D for a .com. This was way back in the late '90s, early 2000s, and something we were careful about, because this was IT certification, was that we didn't want to create what we called paper tigers, people who could pass a test and they knew the knowledge, but could they actually execute on that knowledge?
Yeah, I'm always interested in knowing like how that was, how you were able to do that, because I was one of the learners, and I don't know, I haven't taken a real test in so long. I was never good at test taking. Like, I always got extreme anxiety no matter how confident and how hard I studied. I was always so nervous, and test taking was never my thing. But strategy always was. Like, I was always a deep thought leader and a deep, like I said, lifelong learner. But so I'm always curious because there are a lot of people who can. My son is like that. He has always been like that. He's 24 now, but he could not study. The teacher's insane. He'd fall asleep in class. They think he wasn't learning the material. Wake up, take the test, ace the test, and go back to sleep. Go back to
Mhm.
sleep. And it's like, wow, I think some people are, it's just innate in them to be able to do well in tests, but you're absolutely right. It could definitely create gaps in other areas that tests don't pick up always.
And maybe the testing paradigm in education needs to change from, confirming knowledge, which is pretty low on the scale of knowledge acquisition, to actually being able to execute on that knowledge. I was always a big believer in student projects,
Mm-hmm.
and I would create them iteratively so that I could see the process rather than wait and hope at the end of the semester or the end of the project that the students would pick up on it, because after all, they're students, and sometimes I've done this. I've made a few false starts and carry through the project, and not been able to execute properly.
Right.
So it's important to have the space and time to not only solicit that feedback, but to receive and process it. Um, and people take learning personally. I think it's part of our society that if we don't learn quickly enough, and thoroughly enough, then it's, a personal failure
Yeah.
rather than a difference in how one learns.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're so overloaded with information too, right? It's so much information now because we have back in the early 2000s, especially in the 90s, we didn't have the internet the way it is now. And it's so much more information, and there's so many different means and ways. Like even when the internet was becoming a more popular thing, you had to log on to the computer to access the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the internet in our pockets, and we can't put our phones down. So it's so much information being thrown at us at once. Like you're looking at I'm doing it right now. You're looking at dual monitors, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
whiteboard ahead of me of a bunch of information on it at this point, it's just words on a board, right? So I think this is when, and I know this is a totally different conversation, but another thing that I've been reading a lot more about in this space is mindfulness. And this
Mm.
is when mindfulness is so, so key because it's so much information being thrown at us all the time. And it's so many ways. I mean, there really is an excuse to not learn whatever it is you want to learn in today's world. But we also have to learn how to calm our minds and have mindfulness as well.
Yes, yes. And that's something that's hard to pick up in an accelerated program. Mindfulness is a practice, and watching a PowerPoint or attending a 2-hour session on mindfulness just isn't going to do it. It's something that one has to do consistently and make it a habit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a practice. It's kind of like when they call yoga practices. Mindfulness is
Mhm.
definitely a practice.
Yes, yes. Um, Speaking of practices and projects, can you think of a recent initiative that you think truly captured the strategic potential of L&D from a financial perspective? And what made that work?
That's a good one. I have quite a few that come to mind. I guess the one example that does stand out is working with a CEO whose business looks very strong on paper, but over 80% of her revenue was tied into one client.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you already know where this is headed. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses have fallen into that trap, especially if they're heavy in the government contracting space. I see that a lot in what we do. And so on paper, they looked successful because they had literally millions of dollars in contracts under one division of the government. And from a CFO lens in the fractional space, of course, that was exposure,
Hmm.
very much so. And what's important here is that wasn't, of course, a training issue. It was a visibility and a lack of revenue diversity issue. So, what part of what our team does at the beginning of when we're working with a new business is do that assessment to see what are their different revenue buckets and how diversified are they. So, what we did with this particular client is walk them through what that concentration meant for risk, for sustainability, long-term sustainability, and for the value of the business. And thankfully for this particular client, she came in April of 2024. So we had time, and knowing that no matter what's going on politically, recessions always come, right? There's always some ups and downs in the government. So being prepared is always key. So, one thing we look at initially when we're doing income assessments is how diverse are you? So, since she had come in that early before the Doge cut started to impact her business, we were already doing the diversification buckets, is what we call them. So we had built a diversification strategy that aligned more so even with her personal goals. Her business, I think at that time she was 10 years old, and she was very much thriving in the space that she was in. But at that point, she hadn't no longer really tied her personal goals to the success of the business because the business was just running and it was running well. So, really going back then, we didn't know that Doge would affect her. We didn't even know that that would be a thing when we started working with her in April of 2024. So by the time 25 came around, we weren't reactive out of fear because we already had a blueprint. We already went in with a plan. So when disruptions hit, she didn't panic. She was already positioned for success. So that's where I see the connection to L&D is leaders can only act on what they understand.
Mm-hmm.
So giving CEOs the information of not just here's your P&L, here's your balance sheet, here's your financial management package, they really have to know the story behind their numbers because there's a whole hell of a lot of successful multi-million dollar business that has their money tied into one pot in one sector. And even though Commas with Kellé, we work mostly in the B2B space and most of our clients are private organizations, I was looking to diversify into government contracting because we've already always said that that was the more secure model for jobs, for contracting and business. And so my plan was to diversify there, and it still is, but there's a strategic way of diversification in all spaces. So I really see the connection in learning, and L&D is really understanding what your numbers mean, so no matter what's going on around you, you're not reactive. And until you can clearly see the impact of a decision, then you'll lead differently because now you understand the numbers and share that with your team. I find that a lot of, especially high achieving leaders, hold information close to them as confidential that really does not need to be confidential. Like if they're smart enough, they can back into some of these numbers and figure it out themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So really share some pieces. Like you don't have to tell them the company made $20 million this year because you and I both know we can make $20 million and be net negative at the end of the year. So that may not go off well because they may not understand that, yeah, you made 20 million and you're paying them 75,000 and they're not happy with that. But if you explain to them that our growth plan was to grow by 30% this year and how you contribute to that growth and how we'll pour into you and learning to help you grow as an employee are these ways, then it gives them a powerful resource that they'll work not just for the business, but really leverage them learning while they're working with you in the business as well.
Great points. Great points. And I think it, you may be the first guest that I've had that's spoken about risk from the lens of L&D and, you know, not only financial risk, but organizational risk.
Mhm.
And in L&D practice, we get so bound up with the technical execution that sometimes we lose the connection with not only the values, but the strategy of the organization.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree because I think in L&D, it's kind of like the internet, right? I mean, it's L&D. You're supposed to keep teaching people more and more and have them learn and develop. I mean, that's the whole crust of it. And I do. I think organizations oftentimes don't take the time to assess what the risk could be. And it could be because I have the financial lens. So everything is percentages and risk in my head,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little different. But yeah, most definitely. I agree.
Okay. And I think we've addressed some of what I'm about to ask, but I'm curious what else you think are some of the biggest gaps or underdeveloped areas in current learning programs, and how do you identify and address those?
Yeah, again, I don't think it's content at all. I can scratch that out. I think it's more, I think actually it's connection. I think it's
Hmm.
connection. I think in a lot of things, because we are, especially since COVID, a lot of what we do is virtual now.
Hmm.
So, I mean, look at us. We're recording a podcast virtually now. And so a big a big selling point of when I first launched Commerce with Kellé in July of 2020 was because I had built remote settings and law firm environments since 2012, which was not very common then. And the
Right.
last law firm I worked at, I had built them to be completely paperless, and we, depending on your department, you only had to come in the office 1 to 2 times a week. So when COVID happened, they pretty much just operated as usual. Everybody just took their laptops home and it was business as usual. And the biggest issue that we had was, okay, the office space that we were coming into 1 to 2 times a week, we don't need it anymore. And we have a 7-year lease on left on it. So what are we going to do about that? So I feel like now we've lost a lot of physical connection, and leaders are being developed, but they're not always connecting what they're learning to actual feelings because it's
Hmm.
so hard to do that virtually in this space. But also for my CEOs, what they're learning is not connecting to what actually performs in business, quite frankly. So they have dashboards and reports and data, but there's not always clarity. And so
Mm.
that's more from the financial lens, what I see. So decisions still are being made off of instinct in a lot of cases, or urgency, or
Hmm.
in a lot of times incomplete information, because they may not have all of the data points they need because they are only relying on P&Ls and balance sheets. So what looks like a training gap is usually a decision making gap. It's
Mm.
not lack of knowledge and training, it's decision making. So maybe like L&D should be learning and decision making. That could be a thing.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a great point because decision making is at the heart of business practice,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Because if leaders don't understand how their decisions show up, especially financially, then it becomes difficult to fully realize the ROI, which is what all great CEOs, what's my ROI on this investment? What am I going to do? How am I going to turn this over? But yeah, you have to have good decision makings. And one thing my clients hear me say all the time is we're going to make data driven decisions. Like, how do we make great decisions off of data, but have the great decision making strategies?
mhm. um, how do we measure that?
Yeah. So for us in the financial world, which is one of the reasons, whenever I do in-person speaking engagements, I pull up about my cotillion book bio, and it's a black and white picture of with the little blurb underneath that was in the program book. And I pull that up because the last sentence says, when Kellé grows up, she wants to be an accountant. So I tell people it's rare that at 15, 16 years old, you actually know what you want to be and you actually become that, and you actually have only worked in that path. I have never worked in anything other than accounting. My first job was an accounting clerk at a mental health organization. So I literally have worked in every role in the accounting and finance side of a business, and have really grown through those things. So for me, I think I share that bit of a story because numbers are very clear. So numbers it shows how you show up through the lens of numbers. So I think I tell people I didn't want to be an accountant because I loved math. Actually, I still am not a fan of math. I hate math. I was just great at it. I like it. But I really loved accounting because it's very black and white, or I love numbers because it's very black and white. So for us, it's very black and white and clear. What we're looking at is improvement of cash flows, stronger margins, faster or more confident decision making and clarity because you have the story behind your numbers, fewer financial surprises because you now know the story behind your numbers and you're able to create the roadmap ahead to get over some of the speed bumps and potholes a little bit easier. Because if your learning isn't showing up in a financial performance, executives will always question your value. We've seen that, especially in large corporations. They definitely tie it to those main points of cash flow and stronger margins because they want to know what's the ROI on your role or what you're producing. Revenue tells you how big your business is, and cash flow tells you how stable it is. So in our world, it's pretty black and white. And if more leaders understand that connection, the more effective they would become.
That's interesting. And I love how you're weaving this tale of connections in our discussion. Um, and let's circle back to our earlier discussion about it, accelerated bachelor's degrees. How well do learners understand or have time to weave those connections in what they're learning?
Wow, Bill, that's great. I didn't think of it that way. It's true. I think that is a very good point. They're losing that very thing in the connection. It's natural for me, and I didn't even realize, thanks for bringing that up, of how much I've said connection in this episode.
Mhm.
I am very passionate about relationships. So, one thing people will notice, even if they're not a client of Commas with Kellé, if they follow me online or see me, I'm very relational. And I think that's probably why I focus a lot on connection. And I feel like it goes well in our discussion today. But I do think you lose in that relationship building. Yeah, if you're doing a 4 year, which termed as a 4 year bachelor program, in 3 to 6 months, heck yeah, you've lost a lot of connection time in there. And especially because if you're doing it in that time, you're highly likely doing it online. So you
Mhm.
really lack the connection piece because it's accelerated and it's online. That's a very, very great point.
And it's so accelerated that it's almost an individual experience. I'm old school. I went away to college, and I think I learned as much or more from the personal connections I made with my fellow students and with the professional connections I made with faculty than I did from the content,
Yep.
because
Yep.
learning's a process.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I do tell people that that is a huge piece that I did miss. Like when people are like, if you could do anything all over again, it would have been to be able to stay in on campus and college and not have to work my way through. Because yes, it did help accelerate my career, accelerate my learning in a lot of space, but it really, I even today I still miss what I see people who went away traditionally to a 4 year, that connection piece that they got from staying on campus and having all of those things. And my son, he went away, well, he went to a trade school, so his was a little bit different than mine. I have a daughter who's going into her junior year of high school, and she's really trending to college. She really wants, so she'll be my first child that goes to away to college. And honestly, I'm living vicariously through her because I agree. I feel like that is, I could see that being a huge part of your development.
Especially for traditional college students, because they're young, they're learning habits, and we want to instill that love of lifelong learning. For adult learners, the the flavor of the opportunity is different. There are some common pieces, but there's wisdom that comes from experience, and that's why as a professor, I always enjoyed working with adult students, because they had more urgency, and they understood the value of these connections that they were building, not only with the program but with the people.
Yes. Yes. I wonder how that translates to into, because now they have entrepreneurial programs in college. They didn't have those when I went to college, but also typically entrepreneurs that come out the gate as entrepreneurs. You and I were both in corporate space once upon a time and kind of transitioned into business ownership space. But now they have these entrepreneurial programs where some of these kids don't even intend to ever work for anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting thing that you just made me think about is what about the ones who not only come out of high school and are brilliant learners and just go straight into creating something, having a patent, or into something that's techy, and they're making fantastic money. So they have no desire to go away to college. It doesn't make them any less than, but they definitely will lack in the relational side. And just think about the amount of people, because there's more business owners coming out of today's society, entrepreneurs in today's society than there are, I think, and there'll be more coming along along the way. So I really wonder, I haven't looked into the entrepreneurial programs in college, how they are molding them in that space of relationship and connectivity as they pursue starting their own businesses.
And, some entrepreneurial programs do a great job of instilling the value of networking and forging lifelong personal relationships rather than transactional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I always thought entrepreneurial programs were better suited for adult learners because they adult learners again have a more experience and they have more of a sense of what business opportunities fit them.
Yeah.
We live in a society where it seems like so many high schoolers and college students aspire to be influencers rather than doers. And influencers are busy, but end of the day, what they're building can easily be torn down as trends shift,
Yes.
as they sometimes they lose interest in what they're doing. And I've seen plenty of influencers shift their focus over time, and the audience doesn't carry over with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any closing thoughts for us?
Yeah, I feel like I'd leave with what I have a question. What would be the most important capability that one could really see learning would help them to in their decision making for the long term? So I want people to understand that as you continue to work hard and develop, and if you're investing in developing leaders, but those leaders aren't confident in making sound decisions, there's definitely an opportunity to bridge the gap. So that's a conversation worth having with your CEO. If you're in the L&D space, it's a conversation worth having, and they'll appreciate that, and you then become an even higher ROI for them because you're curious to know how to not just apply whatever it is they're paying in the L&D space for you to learn, but how to transition that into the decision making strategies in your day-to-day decisions for that business. So I'd really like to leave the listeners with that. And if they happen to be any business owners in the space or CEOs listening to this, and they would like the financial clarity piece and bridging personal wealth with your business wealth, then they can find me on all platforms at commaswithkellé.com. I'm sure you'll have the information in the show notes, and our website is www.commaswithkellé.com.
And that's Commons with a K.
Yes. And Kellé with an E. I stopped spelling it out because it just becomes way too long. So I tell people just go to the show notes. And I'm getting kind of pretty good traction on Google now. So if they spell it wrong, it typically still picks it up.
True. Yeah, and typing the URL into a browser may not yield the same results.
at
So
all.
so look for Commas with Kellé online, and please connect with Kellé. She is as you've heard and seen today, she's a wealth of information and experience. And I treasure the time that I've had with you today. It's been so informative and enlightening for me. You've actually prompted some questions, and I'm going to have to sit back during my learning time and consider.
Awesome. Well, I'm so honored. It's been a pleasure to be here on The Perfect Route. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. And everybody, thanks for watching and listening with us. And we'll see you next time as we take another step on the perfect route.